you guys are going to run into things with your organization where, as an executive director, as a founder of an organization trying to become that leader, you really do have to be good at leading your organization. You have to know where you're going to find the answers for things like this in your organization when things just are going to occur, like things you didn't think were going to happen. They just do, okay? And so I have not had to deal directly with this, but there are times when I've had to speak to a board member about something, or about like missing a lot of meetings or whichever. And I think that's part of the reason when you do sign up to get a board member, you know, you're asking people to sign on to be a board member, sorry. You have to realize that it's good to have a conversation with them. Like, okay, here's when I'm planning on having the board meetings. Do these dates work for you? Do these times work for you? Would you be able to make it once every quarter? So I have another physician who works on our board, and you know, she works nights sometimes, and sometimes she can't make it to some of the meetings. So in my bylaws, I have a place that says how many meetings I do expect people to actually make in the year, because that way it lets people know, like, hey, there is a little bit of leeway here. Like, I'm not expecting you to be at every single meeting. And you guys have to remember that even though you are leading the organization, even though you're the founder, even though you're the executive director, and it's an extremely important thing to you specifically, it's not necessarily always the most important thing to everyone else. And life does happen, and things are going to, you know, you're going to have to really kind of like be flexible. I'm going to change one thing here really quick, guys. Sorry. I always do this, and I apologize. 1 second. Just plugging in my microphone so you guys can actually hear me a little bit better. Okay, but these are not for people who are on your board and maybe they miss a few meetings and maybe you're frustrated with them for that. And there are situations where you can just talk to them and let them know, or you can kind of show them like, hey, remember when you signed up for this board? In the bylaws, it does talk about, you know, X, Y, and Z. I do need you guys to make sure that you at least acknowledge the bylaws. And that's part of when you sign people up to be on your board. It's really important that they do know what's in the bylaws and that they do read over those and understand what's expected of them from your organization and as a board member. So yeah, we'll talk about all that in a minute. But basically, when you have a board member who is really impeding the mission of your organization or the progress of your board, or maybe is a constant naysayer, or is just causing a lot of issues on your board as far as, you know, making things move forward. Like, moving things forward on your board should be pretty smooth. There will be some big decisions that you'll have to make, but for the most part, you should be able to sit down with your board, get some really good feedback, get some good opinions, take some constructive criticism. You should have these people on your board that you really believe are, that you can believe in, and that you believe are trustworthy for their opinions, okay? So, I mean, I have a lot of people on my board that I know would tell me no. They would tell me no. Yes, they would say, I don't like that idea. I think this isn't a good idea. This isn't a good direction. Or I don't think that makes sense. Or why would we do something like that? They will question your thought process. They will question why you're going in this direction. They will question why you want to do this specific event. They'll keep you on task for a lot of things. And those things are excellent. You want those in a board member. What you don't want in a board member is someone who is constantly causing some sort of upheaval in your board meetings. There are some people who are just always negative, and they're always going to find the negative in everything. And don't confuse that with somebody who's always playing the devil's advocate, because that's actually really good for your organization. So you just want to keep in mind, like, is this person being obstructive, or is this person doing something that is helpful to your organization, that you actually consider to be a benefit to you and your organization and the mission. So you'll see me looking down. So yeah, one reason to remove a board member is ineffective or impeding the nonprofit mission, okay? Number two is really a conflict of interest. There's something that the board member is a part of, or that does that is really a conflict of interest within your organization. Like, this is a direct violation of like, maybe it's a company that, I don't know, supports something that goes directly against your organization or what you advocate. And generally you wouldn't have a board member on your board like this, but they change and you change. And so sometimes you have to remember those types of things and just always be evaluating that. The third thing is reputation. So if there's any sort of like ethical issues, maybe that someone is now, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, I cannot talk today, you guys. You got me thinking about my kid again, and I started thinking about that. But anyway, something where people are not, they're showing something about themselves that is not ethically in line with the values of the organization. And so you want to make sure that if you see something like that, if you can't address it and you can't fix it directly, that would be considered an ethical infraction. And also their reputation is at stake, then it does affect your organization. These are people that are on your board. So if they've done some things that just aren't reputable and you don't necessarily want your organization to be associated with that, and you can explain how this does not align with your values, I will explain how you can get rid of people like that on your board as well. And then lastly, just consistently working against the group. And there are a number of other reasons. Maybe they're always late. Maybe they don't seem like they're interested anymore. Sometimes people will lose interest from being on your board or just being involved in your organization. There can be family issues. There can be illnesses. There can be all types of things that happen. And I think really the most important thing is to keep that communication open and keep those lines of communication open with your organization. Now, the one thing I do want to make sure that I say is that when you are a founder, when you are a leader, when you're an executive director, you have to make sure too that you are actually doing the right thing, okay? Like you want to make sure that you're actually doing all of the things necessary to create a good cohesive environment for your board of directors. So you need to keep the pulse on, are people engaged? Are they excited? Do they feel like they have a part in what you're doing in the direction of the organization? Do they feel like they have a leadership role? Would they like to do more? Do they want to do less? Then also that's why I say being very clear about whether you have a working board or if you have an advisory type, fiduciary type board that's set up for you. Because for me, I don't think that you should have a working board. I really use my board specifically for their opinions, for their advice, and for their guidance. And I think that's really the best place for a board member in any organization. And then that way, if they want to help a little bit more, they can. And you have to realize, like, your board members are very busy. They have other lives. They have other things that they're doing. They have other interests. They have other organizations that they might support. And so they're there to support you, but they're not there to necessarily do the work. And so sometimes when I'm listening to people talk about their board members, I cringe when I hear them say, like, they're not doing X, Y, and Z, they're not getting donations, they're not doing this. That's not really their job. If they would like to help you and they feel that passionate about the organization, or you have laid those things out in advance, in your bylaws, like the expectations of your board members and all of that, then sometimes you can question those things, or you can say, I want a board that gives 100%. I'm sorry, I want a board that gives, I want a 100% giving board. That's what I was trying to say the whole time. Basically, that is asking for everyone on your board to give something. And if you're going to use that as some sort of marketing tool, or you're going to use that as something that you say to sponsors or that you say to other donors, I don't necessarily agree with that, but a lot of boards do that. I think it puts pressure on people to feel like they need to give to your organization, and people will give to your organization as a board member if they believe in your mission and if they believe in what you're doing and if they want to support it and if they can support it. And that's the other thing. So when you're finding people on your board, don't just find people for what they do or what connections they might have. Find people that you truly value their opinion and you truly value what they're going to tell you and how they're going to help you guide the organization. You want people who actually align with your values of your organization. You want people who actually align with your personal values as well, so that you know that you can depend on their opinion and their constructive criticism, all the things that they're going to give you. Okay, so the first thing, the second thing I want to say is what you want to look for in a board member is you want someone who really can connect with your organization, okay? And you want someone who's going to give you that commitment to your organization. A lot of times we'll be reaching for people. We'll say, okay, we're starting an organization and we just need bodies. And yes, you can do that, but realize that when it comes down to brass tacks and you really need that help and you really need that insight from people and that person to help advise you on which direction to go, because even though you have a main mission as a founder and you may know how to lead your board and you may know how to lead your organization, you know the direction you want to go, which is great, and you have that vision. The problem is that sometimes getting to that place, you do need more heads than one. And it does help a little bit more when you have more heads than one helping you get to that direction. There were a lot of times in my organization where I thought I knew exactly where I wanted to go. And then I would have a board member who would say, you know what, that actually doesn't make much sense to go that direction or to make it go this way. Why don't you try this? Or I would even have my interns, my high school interns, who have come to my organization and really given some really good insight. So don't worry about where the insight's coming from. If you know where you're trying to go and you're open enough to hear from other people how to better accomplish that mission or how to better accomplish that vision, then you'll be much more successful with your organization because you're not trying to be bullheaded. And that's why I sometimes say you don't want to get founder syndrome, because even though you founded the organization and yes, you have a direction, you can still take in opinions from other people. That doesn't always have to come directly from you. So try not to allow yourself to get into that mindset, because yes, we all think of these things as our babies. We created them. We want them to be exactly as we envision them. But sometimes if you know exactly where you're going, sometimes just having those different inputs will help you think of other ways to get there. And so it's really important that you actually allow others to come into your way of thinking and your vision and mission and all of those things. So if you guys have ever had any issue with that, as far as like someone else giving you input, it's totally normal. And I would love to hear if you have, because it is a totally normal aspect of being a founder and trying to lead the organization. And remember that the board totally has, the whole board as a whole will help to decide all these decisions. So no one's making a decision unilaterally without anyone else's opinion. And that's even yourself once you involve your board. So the second thing you want from, or you should expect from your board members, is to attend most of your meetings. And I say most because in my bylaws, I have that they can miss, I don't know, a certain number, like 2 or something, 2 meetings per year or something like that. And the only time you're really going to use that is if you are looking to get rid of a board member and you need to look at their attendance, or you need to look at something to kind of benchmark where they are in the organization and what they're doing and how they're doing things. The third thing you want to look for in your expectations from a board member are, generally you can expect your board member to serve on some other committee or help you with a fundraiser or anything like that. Generally you can expect this, okay? But I would not expect it. I would put it out there for people to help you. But the expectation, I feel like, just as sitting board members in the past, as a sitting board member in the past, and if some of you have been on a board before where people have that expectation of you, I really don't think it's fair. If you're not taking into account what people have to offer, and you're not taking into account what kind of time they have to offer you, I do think it's extremely unfair to them to just assume that they're going to be on some committee or donate a certain amount, or they're going to be at every single event. Like I said earlier, people have lives and they have things that they have to do. And so I don't think it's fair for you to assume that. And I think if you have good engaged board members, they do the best they can, and they will come to what they can come to, and they will support you in every way they can. They will give. But you have to be able to nurture that in your board in order for that to be the case. Okay, so before you start trying to remove people from your board, there are a couple of things that you need to make sure that you're using to kind of decide, okay, if you're going to actually try to move forward with a removal. So first, to avoid any sort of legal ramifications, you need to go back and look at your bylaws to see how you have outlined in your bylaws to remove a board member, okay? And this is when your bylaws are really, really important. And if you don't have this in your bylaws right now, it would be a great time to set up a meeting to amend your bylaws to make sure that you do have a way to remove your a current board member. And this is something that you and your board would come up with as a fair way to remove a board member, what we'd be looking for in removal options, and how we would go about doing that as a board, okay? And so I will give you some of the removal options that are available to you, but just to start with, you wanna make sure that you look through your bylaws and see if you have a removal option for your board members, because you don't wanna be in this position where you need to remove a board member, but you don't have any sort of removal options in your bylaws to help you decide, you and your board guide you in how you're going to do this, how this process looks, and how you're going to start, starting the process. Like what designates a board member to be actually removed from your board. So just remember that piece. The best way that you can possibly remove a board member is through term expiration. So a lot of you know that in the Unleash Your Purpose course, I talk a lot about term limits, and I talk a lot about setting those up for your board in your bylaws. And the reason that I say that is because, and most bylaws will have you do that, but I don't want you to skip over this because it is really important. If you have a term limit of 1 year and they can renew, that's great. Every year you're reevaluating your board members and you're looking to see, hey, do you guys want to renew? Do we need to find a new board member? And it's just easy. It's something that you might do at your annual meeting every year and just, discuss the board of directors and who's terming off and who's terming back on, and to see if you need anybody else to actually, you need to find another board member coming up or whatever, like when does their term actually end and when are they actually removed from the board? So if that makes sense. Does that make sense, you guys? I'm saying, what I'm actually trying to say there is there's gonna be a term limit, which will be 1 year, but maybe their term actually ends, like their last meeting is the following meeting after the annual meeting, after the decision has been made. Or maybe it's the meeting prior and they attend the annual meeting to receive some sort of reward or whatever the case. But basically you're trying to figure out when does this person actually leave the board? Okay, so here's my term limit and they actually leave the board on this date. So those are two things that you'll want to put into your bylaws if you're planning to amend those bylaws. And remember that amendment process has to go through the board. You all have to agree on it, or vote on it at least, and then actually change it and then approve those bylaws again. Let me see here. Where was I? Okay. Now, this is also when it is great to have an advisory board, okay? And on that advisory board or on your main board, you can have some sort of legal counsel. Maybe you have someone in your scope that actually is a lawyer, or in your network or something like that you can ask as a lawyer. Now, I have a lawyer on my board, but she's not able to actually give legal advice to the organization at that time, as a board member. So you want to make sure that you're not mixing the two. I can ask, is this legal? Or she might bring up some things that we might need to be aware of legally, but she cannot give legal advice. So you want to make sure you don't put your board members or your board of directors in a bad situation where they're being asked to do something they really shouldn't be doing. So it's kind of important to do. And if I can get her to come on here and give some of that information from a lawyer's perspective, and being on a board and what she's able to do and what she can't do, that would be, I'll try to do that because she'd be a good person to bring on. Let's see. So your removal options are, you have term limits. Okay, so if they come upon a term limit, which really is the best way, then you can start that removal process. Okay, so term limits. Now you want to make sure that you have this in your bylaws. So if you guys are gonna write down anything from this talk, yes, so if your lawyer, so really quick, before I start this section, I'll answer that, Diane. So yes, if my lawyer is on an advisory board, is that okay? Yes, your lawyer, that's actually where your lawyer should be. I love having my lawyer on my actual board because she was not chosen for her legal advice. She was chosen for just her constructive criticism, and I know she would tell me the truth, all of those types of things. She was chosen specifically for a board of director. But yes, for any sort of like legal counsel or anything like that, they would need to be on your advisory board in a role that is, yes, they're there for that legal advice. And they would be able to tell you even better, like if they need any sort of contracts or any sort of things written or what they're able to do as a lawyer for your advisory board. But you do not want to be asking for that legal advice if they are on your board of directors. So a lot of people get that wrong because they start adding people into their board of directors because they think that they can use their expertise there. But sometimes that can be seen as like a conflict of interest, and sometimes it's just not really a good, healthy thing for your board. Okay, so the next thing is you can create a non-board position if you want to have any sort of, say you want somebody on your board, but they're not necessarily the most reliable person, but they can give you really good advice, or you really would love to just have them kind of in the scope of your organization, helping to guide it and all of those things. You can create a non-board position. This can be something like an advisory board. It can be something like a committee. It can be, like I have a program manager who's there. Yes, if there's a CPA on your board, you can certainly use your CPA. I don't want to say that. That I'm not completely sure about. Let me say that. I'm not completely sure. I would think that your CPA could be your treasurer, but they cannot give you necessarily like they can't give you advice, and then you're like constantly asking that person for advice. And I will have to check the reason why on that, but when you have people on your board of directors, you're really just there as a fiduciary duty to kind of like oversee your organization. And you don't really want, my understanding is you don't want to mix those two. So if you have someone because you need their advice and you need their counsel, then I would either keep them separate or I would keep them on the advisory board, but I would not have them necessarily on your board of directors. And I'm sure it's probably fine if your CPA is there and they're doing they are like your treasurer because they're good with numbers, obviously. But it's not something that they can be offering like their advice. That's not, I know for sure with legal advice, like they could get in trouble for that. So I don't know if it's the same with CPAs for their specific industry. But I know for the legal industry, they can get in trouble for things like that. So that's the one I can really speak on, which is the legal advice. So for your CPA, I would just make sure you ask them if they can do that. And she was just asking, same if there is a CPA on the board. I would just ask your CPA. You want to make sure that you protect your board of directors from getting in trouble in any way possible. So if you don't know the answer or you aren't sure, they usually do know the answer because that's their industry, and you just want to make sure that you ask and not overstep any boundaries as far as anything that you may be asking them. And you can let them know, like, hey, I don't want to ask you anything that would get you into trouble or anything like that. And if you have a pretty good board of director, which my legal board of director is really, really good at letting me know, like, I can't answer that question, or I can't have any part in this. And I think she's just more trying to protect herself from conflict of interest. And so as a legal industry, she knows that part very well. So ask your CPA, okay, Diane? That was a long, convoluted answer to say, ask your CPA, sorry. So the next thing is, always, you guys, refer to your bylaws, okay? So your bylaws are the most important piece of your organization because it really does set up how you do things in the future for your organizations. That's why you'll hear a lot of nonprofits or even like for-profits talking about their bylaws or talking about, okay, let's refer to the bylaws. How does this work? What are we doing? What's the next step? Refer to the bylaws. Okay, we have to amend the bylaws because now we've found that something isn't right in our bylaws or it doesn't talk about these specific things. So those bylaws are pretty much like a working document. And every time you have to make a change to those bylaws, you need to actually go in and amend the bylaws, have a meeting, talk about the amendment that you guys want to make, vote on it, and then bring the new bylaws and approve those new bylaws. So that's pretty much the process every time you're going to be looking at the bylaws and things that you need, okay? Or the bylaws for your organization. So these things are really important. So number 1 is term limits. These are your removal options. Number 2 is a non-board position, and that would be like an advisory board, a program manager, a committee member, any sort of non-board position that you can put them on so that it's not affecting your actual mission or your vision of your organization and not impeding the work that you're actually trying to do. Number 4 is a direct ask. So you want to, as the board chair, just you and so if you're the founder and say you're not the board chair, you'll want to have the board chair, yourself, possibly an attorney if you have one from your advisory board, or an outside attorney if it gets too bad. If the situation gets too bad and you need to bring on an attorney, you want to have all of them at a meeting together so that everybody is aware of what's happening, and you're not doing the direct ask by yourself. Now, that's not to say you can't speak to them directly, like on your own, to say, hey, you've been tardy a few times. I don't know if you're interested in still being in the board, but that would be an initial step, okay? So now we're way past that. Now we're at the point where we know we want to remove this person from our board. So you'd want to get all of them together and do a direct ask for your board member to actually resign. And then if that board member decides to resign, that would truly be the best way. For both the board member and for the organization. You don't ever want to have to really fire or get rid of a board member, but if they are not able to speak to you, or they've been ignoring your calls, or they're just not interested anymore, you would need them to actually resign. But you don't want to be asking that question just by yourself. You want to make sure that you have people there with you that are part of the organization that can also, talk to the board member and make sure that you're doing things appropriately and asking appropriately for them to resign. And then lastly, the last removal options is an impeachment, which I hate to bring that word up today, but an impeachment. And this is by a 2/3 vote of your board. And then, yeah. That impeachment would need to already be in your bylaws. So if you don't have that in your bylaws, you don't really have that option to do. Now these are 5 things that I would say all of these need to go into your bylaws. So you can either do that now while you don't have an issue with any of your board members, and you guys can go add these 5 removal options into your bylaws now, vote on them, approve them, and then this is now how you remove a unproductive or inefficient board member from here on out, which is good to do. And then if you already have the person that you need to remove and you don't have these in your bylaws, then you need to obviously take the time to speak to the person or wait until the term ends. And they will have the ability to impede your organization until then. Unless you can talk to them and ask them to resign. Now, after that's done, you would just need to make sure that you have those bylaws redone, okay? Like you need to make sure you go in and amend those bylaws after the removal so that that never happens to you again. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, that's really all I had to say, and I wanted to make sure that I got that out, all of that out very clearly for you guys, which is why I'm looking through my notes, because I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. But if you guys have any questions for me about anything related to board members or anything like that, go ahead and ask. But that was it for today. I just wanted to make sure that I kept looking down, so I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. So do any of you guys, are all of your board members good? Did you guys do a good job choosing your board members, or do any of you have issues with your board members? Let me see. Okay, Tiffany, I don't know why I can't open this. Oh my gosh. yeah, no problem. Watch it again. I think I actually am going to add this onto YouTube as well. YouTube as well this week, because I do think it's a really important video for people to see, and I do think it's a really important thing for people to just know at baseline when you are starting an organization. And the most important thing, you guys, I say all the time is, yes, you're a founder, but now you need to know how to become a leader of your organization and truly lead them where you want them to go, like where you're trying to take everybody and complete your vision. That's really the most important part. And so this is something that leaders have to know in order to make their organizations run efficiently. So yes, that is it for today. And I appreciate you guys all for being here. Really, really appreciate that. And I hope you got something really good from it today. All right, so yeah, all of that on the kid stuff and whatever. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next week. Get out there and unleash your something amazing. Bye, guys.